Hello, tis I. And I'm going to edit this picture as promised, so you can see how it all works. I've actually done a bit of work to this already. But I've put it back to the beginning so we can see what's going on. Look at this, and first of all, so in Lightroom, I'm just going to get the exposure and the tone curve and the color and all that kind of stuff right, because I've got all the data in the raw image. This is a Nikon raw image. What have we got? 1/160th f8 ISO 64. It's a flash picture, so it's always going to be that. So first thing to do is I'm going to play around with the shadows a little bit, bring that up, but then I'm going to look at this and think, yeah, okay, I need to just re-anchor that. So bring the blacks down a little bit. Experimented with the whites, but didn't like it. Like to leave it quite flat. Did the usual things like turning on remove chromatic aberration, which is like an automatic Lightroom thing. It has a database of lenses, and so it knows how to adjust that, and the lens profile, which takes away some of the edge vignetting, because if I want vignetting, I'm probably going to put that in myself so I can control where it is. Done a tiny bit of rotation because I like them to kind of like lean in to the picture, or that way on this camera, rather than being like that. I like them to be in so they don't look, and with the chin down a little bit. I don't know. Don't need that space. Did it a bit more. Don't need all this here and all this here, so I want it kind of on the third if I can. So we've cropped it in a bit. And then lastly, we need to deal with the white balance, and I've done that just by clicking with this little eyedropper thing somewhere on the white background, and it's given me that. Now I might adjust that later, if I'm honest. But actually I quite like the skin tones in that. I think they look pretty good. And the background is now nice and neutral rather than being that sort of muddy greeny brown colour. Don't pay any attention to this. This is just me making the contact sheets for Sam to choose images from. But that's as far as I need to go on there, really. Yeah, the white point does need to come up at some point, but you can see how it produces those kind of like bright patches, and it hasn't even got there yet. There's a bit more to go. If I were to drag it so that there are some whites, you can see just, nah, that's not good. So we ain't going to do that. That's all I need to do to this image at the moment. You can play around with these different profiles. So Adobe Portrait is kind of just a bit more flat than Adobe Color, but I know I'm going to even all that out in Photoshop, so I don't really need that. If you were going to take pictures and not retouch them, then putting them into Adobe Portrait and using flat lighting from the front would be a good way to go. And that'll just give you something that's reasonable straight out of the gate, but we're going to retouch it. So, right, Photoshop isn't open. Don't reuse old copies of Photoshop on your desktop because it tends to crap out, and Photoshop is not a particularly well written app. So we will now open Photoshop, or we'll ask it to open. It will do it in a minute, and I'm just going to drink this coffee while we wait. Do you like my microphone? It's a big fat one. Just because I thought it'd look cool, really. I always wanted one of them little sort of vintagey looking microphones on my desk. And I've got the Shoot chocolate, which nobody ate. So there you go. Right, here we go. And first thing to do, we don't need, there's nothing around the edges that need, no junk that needs cropping out on this. So we'll just go straight into the blemish removal So I'm going to do the major stuff with the new remove tool. And this is a sort of an intelligent tool, which is much better at making up the other bits. And I've got it set to single stroke at the moment, which is good for this sort of stuff. And the first time you use this on a new image, it takes a while, and you'll see this dialog box. But once it's seen you do it once, the next one, if you do something similar, should be a bit quicker. There we go. So it's now, when you've got lots of this like this, it can look a bit daunting. And I'm going to do the bigger bits using this remove tool. And you just need to just make the brush, you know, just about as big as it needs to be. And I'm using the sort of square bracket keys to vary the size of the brush as I go. And I'm using this pen thing on a tablet. It's only a cheap one. I've had this for about 10 years. I bought it in John Lewis, of all places, for about 40 quid. It's the smallest one that Wacom makes. It's the A5 one, and I prefer that because A, it fits on my desk. You can put it in a laptop bag. But mainly it's because when you use the small one, you move just your hand. You can get these massive ones, but you move your whole arm. And it gets tiring after a while, and it's also, I just find it's just less precise. So I actually prefer the cheap one, which is good. So I just tend to sort of go for the biggest blemish that I can see each time. And this does tend to slow down for some reason as you go along. So you kind of only get so long with it, and then it just becomes a bit tedious to use. And at that point, I'll switch over to the regular healing brush, not the spot healer, but the kind of sample and paste one. You can see it's starting to get a bit flaky now. But you can see, you know, it's doing a reasonable job. And we've got a few other techniques coming which are going to deal with some of this sort of low-level bumpery in a much more sort of industrial way. But you can see on some of this, it's kind of, it is sort of flattening some of the texture on some of this. So we might need to put a bit of texture back in a minute. There's one thing you really don't want in these, especially when you've got somebody like Sam who's wearing quite a lot of foundation actually. It can end up looking, you know, overly made up. I mean, I know that's the look she was going for, but yeah, you can see this is getting a bit slow now. I'm just going to use it on, she's got some quite pronounced, probably smiles a lot, Sam, I feel. Got some quite deep creases there. Now, it depends on, you know, the nature of the image as to whether, you know, how far you go with retouching. You could leave those lines there. They are sort of natural after all, and they're a permanent feature. Just before we move off this, it is pretty good at removing skin folds on the neck. You see that I've drawn over that bit of the chin, but it's intelligent enough, he says, to realise that that isn't part of the thing that I'm trying to remove. I think it looks for like, what's in common about all of this? And it's this bit here, this crease. That's what it's doing. It's working that out, which is the bit I'm meant to remove. Now that's giving it something to think about. Well, okay. Not too bad. And again, you know, you could carry on forever doing this, but don't think... Okay, there's a bit there. It's better to use this tool. This is the remove tool, where there's an edge like that, because it is intelligent and it's not going to blur the edges. The regular healing brush would make a mess of that bit. It only really works when you're doing stuff in the middle of the skin. But we're going to use it because it's a lot quicker. But actually, one thing this is also good at is joining this bit of tone to that bit of tone seamlessly, which is, yeah, it's done a pretty good job on that. Just done a quick look around at any other problem areas. Things along edges of clothes and things like that, it's pretty good at, but, well, maybe we could take this crease out here. See what it makes of that. That's not bad, actually. Just clean that area up. There we go. Now, right, so let's go to this is the old tool, old as the hills, this one. And the idea with this is just work down in one direction, because otherwise, if you start doing it at random, you're going to end up sort of pasting blemishes over other blemishes. So don't do that. Right, Photoshop's having a bit of a benny. And now we can just work our way down the image. And what it's doing is it's sort of blending in from where that little cross is there into the circle, but it's not a straight copy. It's actually retaining the texture and just copying the underlying tones. And it's pretty effective. I need to just reverse the way that goes. And again, we're just looking for sort of big stuff. That's about it for that. So let's come back to the face. There's a few more bits that we need to do. And now we can be a little bit speedier with this, but we also need to be mindful about where we're copying the texture from. And make sure that we get it from a place that is similar, or better actually. Because some of this texture, where you get acne like that, it's perfectly smooth because the skin is stretched into that bump, and so when you remove it, it looks like a flat version of the bump of the spot, which isn't brilliant. But there's a few ways that we can deal with that. Oh, don't forget the lips. So if we come in, so this is 100% now, we can just retouch and edit out some of these larger creases. Now you would only really do this on an image of this sort of size. If this was like a 3/4 body or full length, you're not going to see this. And we're going to do some more stuff to that in a bit. I know it looks a bit scrappy at the moment. Right. And the more you zoom in, the more stuff you see, but it's tempting to just carry on retouching stuff, but I think we're okay with that. Okay. So we zoom out, let's have a look at what we've done. Should have made a copy really, but go there, and then we can go down to the bottom. You can see it's improved already. So now we're going to set up our frequency separation layers. Now I've got an action that does this, which you can have. It's quite easy, and I know that's about the right number for my image. So the idea is that it's separated the texture onto this layer, and we're not going to touch that layer, okay? We're just going to look at this layer, which has no texture on, and we're just going to even it up. Now, people lose their minds about frequency separation. Oh, it makes the skin plastic. Well, hopefully, as you can see, frequency separation, if I flick that on and off, does absolutely nothing to your image. it doesn't do anything, right? You've still got to do whatever you're going to do, except now you've got the texture saved. That's the only difference. We could mess with the texture layer as well, and we might do for this bit. In fact, let's do that now. So I'm going to use the patch tool, which is really the only tool that works properly in this context. And you can see that's a bit too much texture. Let's go back. Let's get a bigger, smaller chunk so we can go somewhere where there's just some nice skin texture that's not enough. Let's just hide the selection. It has sort of carried it over, but it doesn't look right. Let's try a bit of forehead. That looks pretty good actually. In fact, the forehead texture is so big that we can just grab this whole smoothed out area. Just grab that bit of texture up there, maybe. No. I lied. Let's get that bit. Where was that good bit? Okay, I think we might do this a different way. We'll generate some false texture, I think, using some grain. Anyway, before we do that, let's do what we came here to do, which is evening out the tones underneath the texture. So I'm going to start with the forehead, and I'm going to blur this at 8.5. Now I've got the repeat last filter bound to a key on my tablet, so I can just thump it a couple of times. Now I don't blur it, so I've done it about 3 times. Now you could say, why don't I just blur it by a bigger number? Well, that will just even it out more, so it'll become flat. So it's better to do lots of small bits than one big bit. And then we're going to do the rest of the face as a base layer. Just using the Alt key with this just to deselect bits that I don't want it to go on. Now we are going to mask these off, but I don't want them to bleed into the skin. Don't want that colour to bleed into the skin, which is why I'm just taking that off there. And if I hold the Shift key down, I can put a bit back. And I think we need that bit around there. We'll go a bit into there as well. And we'll have that bit. There we go. Okay, that'll do. I think 1 or 2 lots. Let's back off. Yeah, I think 1. And then we'll do this bit separately. I'm just going to whack that until it all evens up. And this bit. And this little sort of dark area here. I'm just going to blend in a lot. There we go. Similarly here. And it's also very good at getting rid of highlights. So if we want to smooth out a highlight, we can just blend that. We don't want to get rid of it completely. I know a lot of people do that. I see a lot of tutorials where they just get rid of the highlights and the face just looks flat. You've spent time lighting this, you know, in that way to get that. Why then remove it? Right, now we've got different skin down here. It's got different texture, different scale to it. So it's going to need to be a little bit different. But to be honest, all we're really going to do is just do it a bit less. We don't need to go anywhere near. That bit there needs just a bit more evening up. And don't forget, we can mask this off wherever we want, so we don't want to destroy any of the sort of bone structure and stuff like that. Clavicles. I think that's pretty good actually. Always zoom out and have a look at your image at a different distance, because then you start to notice these sort of macro shadow areas here. That's a bit which are kind of a bit jowly. Now the other thing we can do to this, and I'm going to make a copy of it because I very often mess this up, this bit. But I'm going to use what's called the mixer brush, which is a bit like if you did a watercolour and you just got a wet brush with no paint on and just mixed stuff on your painting. That's what we're doing. So we've got all the things at 30 apart from the flow, which is at 10, but the most important bit is this is pressed in, which means no paint. So it hasn't got any of this red or anything on the brush. It's just going to mix stuff that's already in the image. And sometimes it remembers what was on the last image you used it on, and the first stroke you do will just be a complete mess and you have to undo it, but then it just works after that. So we're going to keep the image quite small because I want to see these little bits that I'm going to smooth out, and we're just going to mix them together like that. And we may decide that that's too much, but because this is on a different layer, we can just bring it back in a little bit, or we can have a look. Or sometimes, we can decide that actually, now I've seen that, I've discovered a better way, a direction to blend this, and it is just by just evening up that. We want that shadow, but we want it to be complete without gaps. And if we just tab that on and off, I think you can see what's happened there. We can just blend it in a little bit. Sometimes you can just brush across these as well, go across the clavicles just to accentuate them a little bit. Also, we can just spread this highlight out a little bit and then just check what you've done. There we go, we maybe just reduce the opacity on that just a touch. Now I think that's good, but it will have destroyed some of the contrast around some of these edges, so we're going to put a white mask on the whole thing. We've got a black brush at 100% flow, 100% opacity, soft brush. We're going to go back in here and size the brush up and just go over all the bits where we want the detail to be retained. Make sure you are doing it in black. Sometimes I kid myself that this is having an effect, and then I realise halfway through I'm actually painting white on white and nothing's happened. So go over all these little bits of detail there, especially things where you've got edges like that little stud, where you want definition, so around a jaw, edges around the skin, obviously, the lips, and around the edges of the clothes there. Anywhere where there's a hard shadow that you want to retain. And if we want to just make sure we've gone everywhere we need to go, we can just press Alt and click on the mask, and it will show us where we've actually painted, and we can just check that we haven't left any gaps. And that's good to go, right? So if we just toggle it on and off, we can now see where we're up to, and actually that texture now looks all right. Yeah, I can live with that. I might do something to improve that in a minute, but we'll do the rest of the retouch first, I think. Okay, so I don't keep the layers. I know, Photoshop people will do, oh, now you should have like a stack of layers with folders and names, and it'll all be a beautiful and work of art, but it just gets slower and slower because, down here, you look at how much memory it's taking up. It's already up to 870 meg just for this picture. And if I flatten it, hopefully that will go down. There we go, yeah, 210 now. So Photoshop's going to go a bit quicker if we flatten the image as we go along. Right, now, there isn't really any point in doing this on this image, but I'm going to show it to you because it's quite useful, especially on full body or 3/4 images, and that's to knock out any red that you don't want. So we do this just by putting a hue saturation layer on. I'm going to go in the corner there. And we're just going to go, we would do if it would let me click on it. What on earth is going on now? There we go. We're going to go to the reds, and we're just going to drag the slider all the way over just so we can see. This is not the effect that we want, obviously, but it's just so we can see what it's selecting. Now, obviously, we don't want it to just select all the skin, so we want just the really red bits, so we're just going to dial this down a little bit. And really, it's the red bits on the chest, and usually elbows, knees, feet, hands, that kind of stuff. Ears, maybe, but you don't really want to take it off the face. They tend to look a bit dead if you do that. And now we can dial in what we actually want, which is a bit of red removal. So we're going to push it towards the green end. But obviously we don't want it everywhere. So it's already got a mask on it, so we just need to invert that with Control-I. Get our big brush. We want white this time, so I'm just pressing X to spot those colours. 100% soft brush. And we can now just sort of brush it off anywhere where there's some unwanted red. Her nose isn't red, but if people have got a cold or anything like that, or if their nose is a bit red for some reason, this is a good fix for that, and it just instantly makes them look better. But there's a little bit on her ears there, so we'll just take that off. But that's it. We're not really going to do any, there's no real red removal to do on this one, to be honest. But, you know, if we want to check, we can toggle that on and off, and we can see that there's hardly any difference. So again, let's flatten that down, and let's have a look at the lips. Now we can pull a similar trick, so we're going to have another frequency separation layer, and we're going to look a bit careful at the separation. And the aim of the game here is to have just the texture blurred out, because that's what's going to end up on the texture layer. Anything that's blurred on this bit right now is going to be saved as texture. And I think it's going to be around there, because these bits we want to get rid of. In fact, I'm going to say it's 5. Let's put 5 in. And then we can do a similar trick, and hopefully, if we've got that number right, we'll retain the fine texture, but get rid of this sort of mess. There we go. Yeah, that's worked out quite nicely. We'll do, I think, just a couple of touches on the top, maybe a bit in this corner. And then we can see the before and after. But once again, we want to just mask it off the edges. So we're going to put a white mask on it, get the brush, black, 100% soft, go down the middle and around the edges, just to make sure that we retain all that edge sharpness. And then we can have a look. In fact, I think I took it off a little bit too much there, so let's go back in. Okay, and then we can see what we've done. And I think that's reasonable. Yeah, that looks pretty good to me. So again, we'll flatten the image. Next thing to do, eyes pretty clear actually. If there were prominent blood vessels in the eyes, I would just use the remove tool again to get rid of those. Lashes looking fantastic, up and down. Eyebrows looking good. People's eyebrows seem to be just brilliant these days, but when they're messy, I would tend to select a bit of the skin here and just shift it down slightly with a slightly feathered edge to make that edge. But Sam's already got it, so we don't need to bother with that. Now, where's this come from? What's the matter with this today? There we go. Right, next thing. Let's play with the highlights. So we're gonna make 3. No, we're not. We're gonna make 1 copy. Get rid of that. I'm going to set this blend mode to screen, and then we're going to make 2 more copies of that. Put it in a group. No, not. We're going to put all of them in a group. So select all 3, press Control G. But on the background, I'm just going to select the subject because I don't want to do this to the background. And I know it looks terrible now. It will make sense in a minute. So there we are. We only need a bit of a rough selection because we're going to paint this on in a minute. So we're going to put a white mask on that selection. So now it's just applying this to the figure. So we're going to turn off those two layers and just work on this one. I'm going to open up what they call the layer style dialog box. I'm going to work with this thing down here, the blend if sliders. And what this is it says only let this layer show through where the underlying layer is brighter than a certain value, right? And we can figure that out just by moving this slider around, and you can see it's going to start to affect just the highlight areas. And then obviously that looks rubbish, like a cheap 1980s Top of the Pops special effect. But if we hold the Alt key down, we can split this slider and it feathers it in. And then we can further sort of play around with this. And what this is going to do is just give us a bit more pop. It makes the modelling, as we call it, on the figure look a bit better. It's a bit more 3D. Now, just out of habit, I create 3 layers for this because if I'm doing full figures, especially when you've got shiny skin with oil on, you're trying to do the highlights, the base layer and the mid layers. But in this case, we only really need one, and we don't want it that strong either. So we're just going to take it down to about 30 odd. And it just gives just a little bit of a lift to some of those tones. Now, you could do that with a curves layer as well. In fact, there's a load of ways of doing it, but I just like that way. I just think it looks pretty cool for the way it sort of blends in. Anyway, so again, we'll flatten the layers. It just wants to know, do I want to get rid of those layers I turned off? And I do. And just as a last bit of skin treatment, we're going to use an old technique, which is I'd call an inverted high pass. And this is what we did before frequency separation, and sometimes it works better. And I see a couple of spots where this may be beneficial. So you duplicate the layer. And then we're going to run, well, before we do that, we're going to run some tests. Now we need a number that's divisible by 3 that looks fairly blurry. And I'm going to say it's probably going to be maybe 15. Right, yeah, 15 is good. But we don't want to actually blur it. We're just checking to see what amount of blur makes all the texture go away, similar to the frequency separation. But we're going to apply that value to a high pass filter instead. So we're going to just plug that in, 15. And then we're going to blur it by that number divided by 3, which also already happens to be in the dialog box. And then we're going to invert it, Control I, and then we're going to change the blend mode to vivid light. And obviously that looks silly. So we're going to just apply a black mask to that, mask it off completely, get a white brush, 100% soft. And we're just going to go over any bits that just need a bit more smoothing out. Now I see some bits just on the nose here, which could do with just smoothing out a little bit, and a bit just on the forehead there. And this little bit under the eye and around the cheek. I may change my mind about some of these bits in a minute because I'm going to toggle it on and off, and I'm also going to go around the edges again, just like I did with the frequency set. A bit on the arms do get a bit of mottling, and legs. Chest usually all right. Now we can toggle that on and off, and I think we definitely don't want it on all that definition under her cheeks and jaw. So we're going to reverse it to black. Just take that off. And again, go around the lips just in case I went over anything I shouldn't have. Around the edge of the nose, eyes, eyebrows, edge of the face, around the top here, just again just check where it's painted. Let's put that back. There's a little bit of a strange stripe down the middle there, so let's get rid of that. And there. And then we can just come in and just take that bit off, get that shadow back. And again, toggle it on and off just to make sure that we're not wrecking anything. And it's subtle now, but you can see a bit of a difference. Just doing that last bit of evening up, especially after we applied those highlights, that can re-accentuate some things that we may not really want to see. I think she's looking pretty good now, and it looks pretty natural. So again, we'll flatten that down. Now we're just going to work on brightening the eyes a little bit. Now, a lot of people will just raise the brightness level on the eyes, but eyes are not flat, right? These are balls. Right, they're called eyeballs. They are spherical, and so the light will catch them more in the middle and it'll fade off towards the sides. So we need to emulate that. So what we're going to do is we're going to get this little dabber here, and we just want to select the brightest bit of the eye and pull that up. But then we want to select something fairly dark, probably not the black, but something fairly dark in the iris, and just pull it down a little bit. And that's going to give us some nice contrast in the eye. Now obviously it's done it to the whole image, so we're just going to mask it off. And then we're going to get our brush again, soft brush, white, 100%, and make it about as big, just a bit bigger than the iris, and just dab it in like that. Okay, and then obviously we don't want it on the rest, so we're going to swap to black and just draw around it. And then we can press the Alt key, tap on the mask just to get the mask on its own and make the brush a bit bigger, and go around the edges. Okay, and then we know we've got it all. So now you can see that it's making it brighter in the middle, but it's falling off. The effect of what we're doing is falling off into the corners of the eye, so that it still retains that sort of, or even accentuates that sort of ball shape of the eye. So again, Alt and click just to get rid of that, and then we can see that it's just popped the eyes a little bit. And zoom out and just check that we haven't overdone it. I think it's a little bit strong, so we're going to bring it down to about 67. But it's given her a nice light in her eyes. Right, let's have a think about the lips. Now, I think the lip line is slightly lopsided. Now, Sam's done this pretty good. It's slightly outside the line. I've seen some lip colour applied. Oh, hang on. No, hang on. Oh. No, we don't want that. No. Right, okay. I forgotten to flatten it. Right, let's do that again. I see some lip colour which is like really outside the lines, and people have tried to create a different lip shape with the lip colour, and it doesn't work. But we can just help this along, just smooth out the curves and just even out the peak left and right. That's it. You don't want to go too far with this, as it'll alter the facial expression. So if you want to check, just press the P key to toggle it on and off, and that is all we need to do in there. Don't mess with the face. And now we can just do some colour work on the lips. I don't want to do too much because I actually quite like that sort of matte lip effect. So we're just going to put just a rough selection of the lips on its own layer, and we're going to set that to multiply, mainly so we can see where it is. but it's not going to look that dark by the time we've finished. Now again, we don't want that over that whole bit, so we're going to put a black mask on it. We're going to get our brush and we're going to make it super sharp and then back it off one. And we're going to have that on white. And this is not the only way to do it. If our mouth was open, I would draw this along the inner lip line and then erase it off the outside. But because our mouth's closed, we can trace around the outside of the top and then do the overspill on the bottom. So we're just going to come in, and if you hold the shift key down, you can click to get a perfect straight line. And then we're just going to go in here, just make the radius just big enough to get in that curve. And obviously if you can, do it from the inside, but it's not always possible, because eventually it's going to poke out the other side. But that's fairly good. And then switch to black, and we'll just erase off the overspill there. And just give it a bit of a feather in. And that's okay, it doesn't have to be perfect. And now we're going to apply a hue saturation layer just to that layer. So if we get this and we just clip it, so it's only going to apply to that layer underneath, okay? And for now, we're just going to whack the saturation up, which is going to have the effect of lightening it slightly. And now we're going to use our old friend, the blend if sliders, and this time we're going to take it off the highlights. So we're going to dial that in until it starts to come off the highlights. Now I could just make it look glossy like that, yeah, but I want to retain that kind of matte nature of it, so I'm going to split the slider and just feather it in, okay? And we can sort of just play around with that level until it looks fairly natural. Now we can have a look and see what that's done. Zoom out, now you can see that that's way too much. So I can reduce the opacity to say 24% there, and it's just darkening it slightly, just accentuating it. I can also now come in here and play around with the hue. So if I want sort of more brown colours, I can do it there, or I can back it off the other way. Just go back to the middle, maybe just slightly more red, and that's it. Before and after, I think just slightly less. So let's go for 20. There we go. And I think I might want just a bit more of a highlight on it. So just going to bring that in a little bit there. Okay, that's better. Right, like that. Now the other thing is we may let's just accentuate the blush. So for this we want red, which I've already got because it knows. This is what I did last time. So when you're painting on a mask, it's always black and white for the colour swatches over there. But on the layer, it's the last colour that you used, which is usually red. So I'm going to put the brush back to soft, but I want a flow of 1%. So hold the shift key and do 0.1. And it will give you 1%. Obviously you can type it in or mess with the slider or whatever, but I just find it quicker to type it. And we're going to come in here, and we can already see where she's got some blusher on, and we can follow that line, and we just want to just stroke down. Now we can go overboard with this because we're going to mask it off again in the middle, in a minute, in the middle. Now, we can also do it on here, but don't forget that this is just on the edge, so we're just going to do, and it's darker as well, so you tend to get more of an effect. Now, we don't want to just paint on top of our picture, we just want to affect the colour, so we're going to change the blend mode from normal to colour, so we retain the texture and all the detail underneath, and then we're going to zoom out and then adjust the opacity, because when you zoomed in, it looks less than it really is. Now you can see that's way too much. So if we go down to, I think maybe something like 35, and toggle it on and off, and that's it, right? It's very subtle, but You don't really want to be able to see it. In fact, that might be still a bit too much. I'm going to bring it down to 31, maybe a bit less, 29. There we go. So it's you can just about see it. Now, there are some other things that we can do to the eyes. We can put a glow into the eyes, but with this style of lighting, you kind of get that a little bit naturally. Can you see this sort of broad highlight at the bottom here? That kind of emulates what you get. If you get the light from the top at exactly the right angle, you get total internal reflection in the eyeball and it comes out at the bottom. But I'll show you how to do it. But I don't think we may not end up keeping it on this one because we've already got a highlight at the bottom. But you create a blank layer, get the round, or what does it call it? The elliptical marquee tool, and just draw a circle which is about the same shape and size as the eyeball. Okay, about there. And fill it with white. So in this case, white is the background colour on the swatches over here. And that means I can use Control and Backspace to fill that. Now the idea is we're going to create a crescent. And one way to do that is now we can just use this rectangular marquee tool to cut it off just below the centre of the circle. Just delete that. And then get the move tool. Oh, no. Let's deselect that. Let's put that back. Yeah, click on the, control click on the layer to select the shape. Oh. Get the selection. I've forgotten how to do this. Just talk amongst yourselves, viewers. What did I do to do this? There we go. I don't know why I wasn't doing it before. I'm sure that's what I was doing. But anyway, with the selection tool selected, you just click and drag the selection up, and then I can delete that selection from that, and that gives me my little crescent. Now, obviously, that looks just like a big line. And I'm going to blur it slightly by, yeah, that's about right, actually, about 5. And then we're going to set the blend mode to overlay. And what you get is this little crescent. And the idea is that you put this opposite where the light source is. We need another one, so we're just going to duplicate that layer. And then just put it on this eye there. But you can see the sort of glow that it's made in there. But the reason why I'm probably not going to keep this is that because there's one there, it's interfering with that and it's making it a bit scrappy. So if we come out, it's also a bit strong, right? So it looks like she's underlit and it kind of gives you kind of devil eyes. If I put both of those layers in a group, then we can toggle them on and off. Yeah, it's way too strong. We'll try reducing it down. So that's 40%. And we can see, do we like it? I'm not sure, to be honest. I'm going to reduce it further. That's not bad. We'll go a bit further. 17%. Just a hint. Do we like it or not? Do you know, I don't. But anyway, it's very effective on certain beauty images that you do with a beauty dish, which is straight on, and the lighting's a bit more flat, and you haven't got any of that highlight in the eye, and you can see more detail in the iris. But in this case, it's worth demonstrating, but I don't think we're going to use it. So, what else can we show you in terms of retouching? So we've done the lips, we've done the eyes, we've done the skin. We could put some of that texture back. So we will generate a new layer, but we're going to do it in a particular way. So we're going to do layer, new layer, and we're going to put the blend mode to soft light and fill it with grey. And then we're going to generate some noise. to dial this up until we see something approaching skin texture. I think uniform is going to be better. It's going to be about there. And we're going to blur it slightly because it looks a bit like actual noise at the moment. So we're going to blur it by, I think, maybe 0.5. There we go. And we're going to mask it off because we don't want it everywhere because we've already got texture on the rest of the layers. And then we're going to get our brush, white. I'm going to put the flow back to 100 by pressing Shift and 0. And then we're going to paint this in. Now we don't want it over places where there's already texture. And we don't really want that much of it. So we're just going to dial it down. Okay, we're just going to take it off that bit. That's already got some texture on it. And that's about right. Maybe just take it off that bit. And it's just broken it up just slightly. We might ramp it up just a little bit. There we go. Right. Now, hair. There are certain things that we can do with hair. We can do some similar tricks that we did before. So we can set this layer to screen. And now we're going to do the blend if, but we're just going to look at the hair and we're just waiting for the sort of the highlights to pop up. It's going to be about there, and then we're going to split the sliders as before and dial that in. Mess with it a bit more. I want it to be fairly even actually. There we go. Mask that off, and then we can just get a brush, white brush, and just apply it to the highlights in the hair where we want it. And again, we can always dial this down. So, oh, don't get it on the edges, onto the background, or on her face. Okay. And we can also just feather that in. There we go. Then we'll dial it down as before. And a lot of this you can see, like a common theme is soft brushes and dialing everything down after you've done it. So I've gone a bit too far there, so maybe most things end up around 30%. Don't know why, but there you go. And that's just giving a little bit of a lift to the hair. Now there's something else you can do to hair using, of all things, the oil paint filter. And again, it may not be applicable to Sam's hair, because actually it doesn't look too bad in terms of smoothness, but this is a way to smooth scrappy hair. We put it on, make a selection of the hair and put it on its own layer and go to filter, stylize and oil paint, and everything's at maximum, scale is at minimum and bristle details at minimum, and this thing here should point at where the light is, and that's from above, so that's already right. Now, obviously we don't want it everywhere, so we're just going to mask it off and again get a brush. If Photoshop stops responding to the keyboard, press the escape key. It's usually because it's like highlighted some box somewhere. It's just annoying like that. And we can just now just paint this back on and you'll see that it's sort of smoothing the hair, but we don't want to go outside the boundaries of the hair because it's going to do strange things to skin texture and to the background. And in fact, when we've done, we're just going to get black with a bigger brush and just go around the edges just to make sure that it isn't on anything else. We can check our mask. There it is. Now, if we toggle that on and off, you'll see that it also lightens the hair again a little bit, but it does smooth it. But if we zoom in, I guarantee it's going to look a little bit nasty. All right, if you look at that, you can see that looks weird. So we're going to have to just back it off until it's just there in the background behind the actual hair texture. So again, we've ended up at about 30%. And it's a subtle difference, but it just gives it a little bit more sheen. And we could put glow on it. Don't tend to do that with these, if I'm honest, but we'll give it a go. Again, it's just by way of demonstration. This is a thing you can do. Two ways of doing it. I tend to use this way. They achieve exactly the same effect. And this is a way of combining a layer with itself. And the important thing is to select multiply in the blending. This should be all the channels. It should be the image itself. Layers are merged. But this is the important bit. Multiply. So now we can just really see the highlights. And we're going to set that to screen. And then we're going to blur that layer by about the same number as you've got megapixels on your camera. And what that's doing is it's got the highlights and bloomed them out. Now you can pay for filters and all kinds of weird things that will do this, but that's all they're doing, is just selecting the highlights and blurring them over the top. Certain photographers, mentioning no names, think that this brings detail out of the shadows. It doesn't. The extra light that you're seeing is just the highlights plastered over the top. It doesn't bring detail out of the shadows at all. But it does reduce the contrast. Now, depending on the style of image, if you're Vivian Mock and you're taking sort of romantic pictures of nudes in window light, then yeah, this is a good thing to do. For these sort of makeup shots, not so much. Maybe if you lived Tyler in the 90s, so I think she had that filter on permanently. But in any case, you dial it down a bit again, and somewhere between 30 and 50% normally for this one. If we leave it at 40 or thereabouts. But yeah, I don't know. What we might do though, in this case, is do it without the blurring. So if I go back in the history to just before the blur, and then go back and then dial it down, maybe go a bit stronger with this to 50, then I think I quite like that. I think that's giving it a little bit more of a lift overall. And I think I'm going to keep that. Right, now let's have a think about the background. There's a few things that we need to tidy up on the background. Now always move your image about so you can see whether things on the background are actually in your picture or just crap on your monitor. I can't tell you the number of times I've been going, why isn't that cloning out? And only to realise that it's a dirty finger mark on my monitor. Anyway, I can see some things there. This is the good old background finger marks at the kiln. And we don't need to be too precise with this. We're just going to use the, that's a dust spot on my sensor. We're just going to use the, yeah, you see that's on my monitor. So you guys didn't see that. And there's another way to sort of clean this up in a macro way, which we'll do. And I should have saved the selection that we made earlier of the model, but never mind. We're going to duplicate the layer. We're going to select the subject again. And this time what I should have done was come down here and done save selection and just give it a name. And I'm going to just expand this selection a little bit because I want to make sure I've got all of us selected. So we're going to do modify, expand 10 pixels, and then modify feather by 5 pixels. And then I'm just going to cut that out, and I'm going to paste it back onto its own layer. So I did Control X to cut it, and then Control Shift and V to paste it back in place on its own layer. So you can see we've now got the model there. So if I take the base layer away, you can see that what we're left with is this bit here. Now, I don't want that little black bit, I miss that bit. So we're just going to take that out by doing that, because we don't want that. Put all the layers back on, but we're just going to work on this middle layer, and what we're going to do is blur this by a factor of about 90 pixels, and that means everything on that background is now just evenly flat. It retains all the tones, but all the the overall tone, but it's now smooth. What you are going to get though is a little bit of banding, and the way to fix that is just after you've done the smoothing is put about, for my camera, about 1% noise, Gaussian noise into it. This will differ from camera to camera, but for my D850 it's about 1% is the noise that it naturally generates on these pictures, so you need that to match. And now we can just combine these two layers, but just to make sure, if we toggle this on and off, you can see that it has sort of destroyed some of the hair texture. Now you might like that, because it's effectively dealt with the flyaways. But what it has done is it's sort of bled the colour into the background there, and I don't mind the flyaways. Hair's hair, right? I want it to look like proper hair, not like some sort of Lego adventure. So what I'm going to do is just put a white mask on there and get the brush, black brush, 100% soft, and just go around the edges and just put that back, so any hair detail. Now obviously if there are any imperfections in the background at this point, and I think I'll just bin off those topmost flyaways, but the rest of it is good. Right? I want those bits and bobs, especially as we were blowing her hair at this point. We don't want those to destroy all the stuff we worked so hard to do in the studio. Now we could change colour of the hair, we could colour the hair. I mean, I know that she was a little bit bothered about the hair now looked a little bit silver, or the colour was still showing on the ends of the hair. And we could even that out, but to be honest, I think it's not obvious because the light is quite dynamic and changing over this. If it was just one piece of hair, and it was obvious that the ends were a different colour, I might be tempted to just reduce the saturation, in this case, selectively on the hair. But I think that's good. I think we're done, really. I could do more work to smooth out these. In fact, let's do it. But I might not. Again, I might not like it. So this is what they call dodging and burning. So we're going to make 2 curves layers. There are lots of ways of doing this, but I find this is the most natural. I don't use the dodge and burn tools. I don't use that soft light grey layer thing that lots of people like. I find it's just too heavy-handed. Because what this is doing is that it's only going to work with the tones that are already in the image, right? So we're applying either an uplift or a down shift using the curves layers, and we're just going to mask those off and then go to our brush, white brush, but again we're going to go to, I think, 2% flow. Always leave the opacity at 100. The difference is if you do opacity at say 50% and wipe across the image, if you then go over that, where you've gone over it before, it's going to reduce it to 0, and you're going to end up with a stripy patchwork, whereas it's always going to just continually reduce with the flow. I'll continuously apply it. Now, I just want to just improve this little bit here. I don't want to take all the shadows away, otherwise it's going to look like our eyes are kind of like bulging out. We need that shadow underneath to tell us that the eyeball is coming out of the face, rather than the face just coming up to meet the eyes. But this bit here can get a bit lighter. Now I could have done this on the frequency set layer with the mixer brush and just push that highlight into it, but I forgot. So we're going to do it this way. Now so this is the one that's making it brighter. So I'm just, I'm on the wrong bit. So I need to not on the actual curve, go on the mask. And now we can just blend that in there. And again, you can always check just by toggling things on and off. Okay, and decide whether it's better or worse. It's like going to the opticians. Again, I'm going to say, just blend it into that bit. I'd say it is better, but I don't want it quite that much. And then for this one, we may just, I'm going to come down to 1% for this. And we can just accentuate where the shadows are a little bit. This will just sort of make the nose a bit slimmer. Just go around the edges of the face. And if we're just concerned whether it's doing anything or not, we can just toggle it on and off. And you can see that it is. It's very subtle. And just to make the lips a little... Oh, I've gone back on there again. To make the lips a little bit fuller, we can just accentuate the shadow under the bottom and in the crease there between the lips. Again, turn it on and off. And on the highlights, we can just go over the lips there. Now, there's some other stuff that we can do to lips, but that's for another day, because it's really only for glossy lips. Whereas I really like this matte look. That Sam's achieved with her makeup. It looks really good. We could also accentuate things on the chest. So if we want to just, increase the highlight on the clavicles, we can do that. We can come and do that, some dodge and burning on the chest there. And again, just turn it on and off just to make sure you haven't gone overboard with it. Again with the shadows, cleavage, under the chin, maybe just under there. If she had sort of less than good eyebrows, these are really good eyebrows, but you could accentuate them and just darken them down slightly. Again, just check it. Zoom out. So that's the highlights. Oh, that's the highlights. That's the shadows. No, that's the highlights. God, they're both highlights. That's why, idiot. Yep, make sure I've got that the right way round. Okay. That's a little bit too much, so we're going to bring that curve back up. We can also just affect just the shadows more just by bending it down there. And similarly for the highlights, now we'll feather this in and just put it up there. Subtlety is the name of the game. Put them in a group, and then we can toggle the whole thing on and off. And again, It shouldn't be obvious that we've been. Now we could change the colour of the background, we could put textures on the background, that kind of thing. I don't think I'm going to do it with this one. But well, okay, let's do one just as an example, but again, I don't think we're going to end up using this. Now I've saved some in what Adobe calls the library, but if I hadn't, I'd just open up another picture from Lightroom of this and it would appear up the top, and then I'd just drag it onto this layer. But I've already got some that I use quite a bit in here. And we want one that's about the same shape and size, and I like this sort of stucco thing. This is a piece of wall that I think was around the corner from the Pantheon in Rome. I don't like the edges, so we're just going to make it a little bit bigger like that. We're probably not going to end up keeping the colour in this, but for now we'll leave it on there. Go to the layers. And we're just going to, yeah, okay, let's just put it there. I don't need to keep it as a smart object, so just to speed things up, I'm just going to rasterize it. And then we are going to put it in a group, and we're going to bring back the selection that we saved earlier of our model, and this time do an Alt and click on that. And obviously it looks pretty ropey, but we're going to change the blend mode from pass through to overlay, or maybe soft light. And I think we do need to lose the colour out of that. So let's do Control Shift and U. And now we've just got some nice texture on the background, but do I like it? Not sure. Let's go to overlay. On that. Soft light, we can try reducing the opacity just so that it's just a little bit of mottling. It's not bad, it's not bad. Actually, not bad. I quite like that. I might just knock it back a little bit. We'll end up at 30% again. And it has just very slightly darkened it. So let's put a curves layer in. That's just on that layer. And just pump it up a little bit. Yeah, and now there's barely any change to the overall brightness of the background, because that can really make it look fake, because your subject retains the original brightness. So if you darken the background, all of a sudden she looks just way too bright. I think maybe we can just brighten it just slightly more. Yeah. And now we've got a bit of texture on the background. Yeah, okay, I like that. Right, so again, let's flatten that. And the final thing that I do in Photoshop is just some selective sharpening of features like the eyes and lips. And maybe any sort of little, and the nose actually, don't forget to sharpen the nose. And usually the sort of leading edge of the hair. Again, you may not be able to see that on the video, but it's definitely there. Okay, that'll do. That'll do. I'm going to save it. Now this sometimes takes forever. I don't know why. And it is going to take quite a while on here, so just talk amongst yourselves. But hopefully you can see that, well, you'll see in a minute when it's saved, and we'll do a bit of a comparison. That we've done a lot of subtle changes, but the whole thing together can be quite effective. Okay, there we go. That's done. And because I opened this from Lightroom, the edited one appears next to the original in Lightroom, and now we can compare. So I've put them side by side, press Shift and Tab to temporarily get rid of all the menus and things. And now we can see where we started and where we've come from. And bear in mind that even that's not that sort of candidate one. The before is not the actual starting point. That was after the colour work that we did. But you can see that we've selectively brightened and coloured in things. And the end result is pretty good. Now, there's kind of a thing that I do, and I do this now after I've retouched it because it's something that I don't want to lock into the image. So you'd think because it's a colour related thing, I'm going to do some colour grading on it. But it's not something that I always end up keeping. So we'll go back to develop and we're going to go down to colour grading. And this allows you to just put colour washes over the midtones, the highlights and the shadows. And the standard effect, which you'll see in just about any sort of cover on things like Vogue, Cosmopolitan, any magazine like that, is that they put a bit of blue in the shadows and a bit of yellow in the highlights. It's just a thing. So we're going to overdo it a little bit just so we can see the effect of where it's applying it. And we don't normally do anything with the midtones on this one. And then we can come down to this slider here, the balance, and just push it just a little bit towards the yellow because it tends to treat too much of it as shadow. And then just knock the whole thing on and off just to see. And it gives it a bit more of a grown-up air. It sort of knocks the edges off it and produces that nice gradation between blue to yellow. And we'll just reduce it. If you want to zero these, just double click on the circles and they'll go back into the middle. You can also affect the brightness and shadows by dragging these sliders. It's just another way of adjusting the highlights, but you can see it starts to sort of posterize it a little bit, and I'm not really a fan of that. I want to keep this. Her makeup style is because it's quite matte. It speaks to me of quite a sort of serene sort of view, so I don't want a lot of contrast and punch in this, especially with her expression as well. It's quite sort of neutral and sort of melancholic, if you like, almost like sort of Wuthering Heights kind of thing with her hair blowing there, and quite a sort of, you know, what could we say about the top? It's kind of it's pretty. It's not an aggressive sort of outfit. Now we could, the last thing to do is really just mess with the black and white points just to make sure we're maximising the dynamic range. So we're going to stretch it, and I'm going to predict that increasing the whites is not going to be the way to go. And I think I'm right. I think maybe just ever so slightly. We can try the midtones, which is what exposure is in Lightroom. But no, I don't think that needs to move. Highlights is the next bit down, and you can see which bit of the graph it's adjusting because it highlights it. You can actually just drag the graph, but I prefer to do it on the slider. And I think, again, subtlety is the name of the game, and I'm just going to go for about +6 as it happens. Right, now we can hold the backslash key down just to see the before and after, and that's before and after the changes that we did from Photoshop. So that's as it came out of Photoshop, and that's after our sort of minute little colour changes that we've done. And I think we can probably just go a little bit further with the blues. So I'm just going to bring them down just slightly, a little bit more. Before, after, that's a bit too much. Yeah, it was better where it was. There we go. A bit less. Yes, there we go. Increase the blues. Now that I've knocked the balance over a little bit. Okay, right, now we just need to export it. So I'm going to export the before and after, because it's quite a dramatic way to look at it. But I've got some presets in Lightroom for this. So there's all kinds of weird and wacky ways of doing it. People try and do this in Photoshop, and you can, but it's all legacy stuff and it's all quite laborious. But so I want a purple port one, and I want another one. I don't need to do a special Instagram one for this because it's horizontal, so it doesn't need padding out, and there's nothing to censor, so we're good to go on that. So we're going to do batch export. I've already got the folder for this because I did an image earlier, so there's Sam there. And it's going to create the, put the various things in the various folders. And we're just going to click export, and it's going to clunk away. And we should get a folder on the screen in a minute. There we go. And that's our final image, and there we can see where we started and where we've ended up. And just to recap what we've done, obviously we did the colour work, which is already baked into this one actually. I should have reset this before I output it. So this is with the colour work. And so in Photoshop, we cleaned up the skin blemishes, we cleaned up the cracks on the lips, we removed the smile lines, as they're called, and we evened up the tones, removed these lines, we evened up the tones, more blemishes down here and creases and things, which, you know, everyone has, but they become noticeable in a still image because you're looking at the same frame, you know. If the person's in front of you, they're moving about, and you don't lock on to these details, but when it's a still image, and that's why we remove these things, really. I know people get all upset about removing stuff, but especially things like this, which are temporary. We evened up the texture on the lips. We did some stuff to the texture on the cheek. We got rid of these lines and these minor bags under our eyes, but don't forget that we had the light coming down from above, or it's biased from above. So although it's soft light, it's still going to sort of show up the features, and that's what we want, right? Because we want, you know, features on her cheek and that kind of stuff to show up, but it also does this. So we've just removed that. We balanced the colour out a little bit, although it didn't really need it. And then did some contrast work with those screen layers just to sort of make everything pop. And you start to sort of build that up layer by layer until we get to where we ended up. And obviously we put a bit of colour in the lips as well. I mean, sorry, in the cheeks and in the lips. Brighten the eyes a little bit, sharpen things, smooth things. And there it is. Now, it may look like a lot of work because we've been at this quite a bit, but it's because I've been talking. And I did a couple of things that you don't really need to do to this one. If I was going to do this from scratch without talking, it would take me about half an hour, which isn't bad. You can get automated tools for doing this stuff, but I haven't really ever seen one that does it properly. It always looks a bit over the top, if you ask me. But I'm quite happy with that. So we'll output that one, send it to Sam, and hopefully she'll like it. So anyway, obviously there's a load of ways of doing this. You don't have to do it exactly how I've done it, and some of these things you won't be able to do in the mobile version of Photoshop, but some of the things you've got in the mobile version of Photoshop aren't in the desktop version, you know, like that automatic AI skin treatments that you had on the mobile version. I've never seen that. It might be in the desktop version. I just don't go looking for that stuff, to be honest. But this is how I do it. So you can pick and choose whichever ones of those techniques you want to use. And if you are using the desktop version, you want my frequency separation action, I've got it. It is here somewhere. No, I have got it somewhere. I can send it to you. So Yeah, let me know if you want that. It's useful for all kinds of things. It's useful for ironing fabrics, getting rid of creases in fabrics and things like that, as well as skin. Anywhere where you can separate things into two layers based on the size of the objects, and then do things to one size of object and leave the others alone. Anyway, see you later.